There are places on Earth that don't appear on maps. Places so dangerous that entire governments quietly pretend they don't exist. Most are hidden by mountains. Some are buried beneath oceans. And a few are sealed beneath the ground, waiting for someone curious enough to open the wrong door. This story begins beneath the mountains of Eastern Europe and ends somewhere no human being was ever meant to find. For nearly 200 years, explorers had whispered about a forgotten tunnel system hidden beneath an isolated mountain range known locally as Devil's Passage. The legends were always the same. Travelers entered. None returned. Entire expeditions disappeared underground without a trace. Equipment was occasionally recovered. Bodies never were. Historians dismissed the stories as myths. Locals refused to go near the mountain. And eventually the world forgot about it. Until Victor Kane found the map. Victor wasn't an archaeologist. He wasn't a historian. He was a treasure hunter. The kind of man who chased lost fortunes and impossible legends. And according to an old journal purchased from a private collector, something valuable had been hidden beneath Devil's Passage centuries earlier. Something worth killing for. The journal described tunnels stretching deep below the mountain. Ancient chambers untouched by modern civilization. And a city no one had ever documented. Victor assembled a team immediately. 6 people. 6 lives about to disappear. There was Elena Markovich, a cave specialist with experience exploring underground systems across Europe. Marcus Holt, former military. Security. The person you wanted beside you when things went wrong. Lucas Werner, a historian obsessed with lost civilizations. Sofia Petrov, a geologist. Practical. Skeptical. And Victor himself, along with cameraman Daniel Ross, whose job was documenting the expedition. Their plan was simple. Enter the tunnels. Find evidence of the lost city. Leave. Nobody expected what they would discover. The entrance to Devil's Passage sat hidden inside a remote valley surrounded by towering cliffs. A massive crack in the mountain descended into darkness. Cold air poured from within. Air that smelled ancient. Stale. Wrong. The locals refused to approach the entrance. One old villager offered only a single warning. If you hear singing underground, run. Victor laughed. Nobody else did. The expedition entered the tunnel shortly after sunrise. At first everything seemed normal. Ancient stone corridors. Collapsed chambers. Centuries-old carvings covering the walls. Evidence that someone had once lived there. Far below the mountain. The deeper they traveled, the stranger things became. Passages appeared deliberately constructed. Not natural caves. Roads. Staircases. Doorways. Entire sections carved with impossible precision. As if an entire civilization had once existed underground. Hours later they discovered something astonishing. Fresh footprints. Not old footprints. Recent ones. Human footprints. Deep underground. Miles from the nearest village. Marcus immediately stopped walking. Everyone stared silently. Because there was only one explanation. Someone else was down there. And they weren't alone. Victor wanted to continue. Marcus wanted to leave. Victor won. It was the worst decision of their lives. Near evening the expedition reached a massive underground chamber. And for several seconds nobody spoke. Because beneath them was a city. An actual city. Stone buildings stretched across the cavern floor. Bridges crossed underground rivers. Hundreds of lights glowed throughout the darkness. The city was alive. People moved through the streets below. Children. Families. Workers. An entire civilization hidden beneath the earth. The discovery should have changed history forever. Instead, it became their death sentence. The city had survived underground for centuries. Completely isolated from the surface. Protected by mountains and secrecy. And according to every historical record, it shouldn't have existed. Yet there it was. Watching them. Because the moment the expedition arrived, they realized something horrifying. The city had already noticed them. Hundreds of faces stared upward. Silent. Unmoving. Watching. Then every light in the city went out simultaneously. Darkness swallowed the cavern. And somewhere below, a horn sounded. The explorers ran. Instinct took over. Nobody needed to explain that something was terribly wrong. The tunnels behind them suddenly filled with movement. Footsteps. Hundreds of footsteps. Coming fast. Very fast. Marcus turned his flashlight behind them and saw dozens of figures sprinting through the darkness. Not chasing wildly. Hunting. Organized. Disciplined. Like soldiers. The expedition barely escaped into a narrow tunnel. But Daniel wasn't fast enough. His scream echoed through the caves, then stopped instantly. Nobody went back. Because they already knew. Daniel was gone. Hours later, the group barricaded themselves inside an abandoned chamber. Exhausted. Terrified. Confused. Lucas finally translated carvings found on the walls. The message changed everything. The underground civilization called themselves the Keepers. And they followed one sacred law. No outsider may return to the surface. Ever. For centuries they had remained hidden by eliminating anyone who discovered them. Explorers. Miners. Soldiers. Entire expeditions. If someone entered their world, they never left. That was how the city survived. And now the group understood why nobody returned from Devil's Passage. Because nobody was allowed to. The next morning they continued searching for an exit. But the tunnels no longer made sense. Passages shifted. Routes disappeared. Doorways led to places that shouldn't exist. The mountain felt alive. Like the entire underground network had been designed as a maze. A prison built on a massive scale. And they were trapped inside it. Then they found the bones. Thousands of them. A hidden chamber filled floor to ceiling with human remains. Equipment from different centuries. Roman helmets. Medieval weapons. Modern backpacks. Generations of outsiders. All ending in the same place. The realization broke Sophia completely. Because this wasn't a city protecting itself. This was something much older. Much darker. That night they heard the singing. Soft voices drifting through the tunnels. Beautiful. Almost hypnotic. The same singing the villager had warned them about. Marcus covered his ears immediately. Lucas didn't. Neither did Victor. Within minutes they began walking toward the sound. Like sleepwalkers. Like puppets. Marcus physically dragged them back before they disappeared into the darkness. But Victor kept repeating the same sentence over and over. They're calling us home. The next day they finally saw what lived beneath the city. And it wasn't human. Not entirely. Deep below the underground civilization sat an enormous chamber. At its center stood a black stone structure older than anything they had ever seen. The keepers gathered around it in silence. Praying. Worshipping. Terrified. Because something moved inside the stone. Something enormous. Something alive. The civilization wasn't hiding from the surface world. They were guarding something beneath it. And suddenly everything made sense. The city wasn't the secret. The thing below the city was. For centuries the keepers had sacrificed outsiders to whatever lived inside the stone chamber. To keep it sleeping. To keep it contained. To keep it from reaching the surface. Then Victor made the mistake that doomed them all. He touched the stone. The chamber shook instantly. A deep sound echoed through the mountain. Like a giant heartbeat. Once. Twice. Then the black stone cracked. The keepers began screaming. Not in anger. In fear. Pure fear. Because whatever had been sleeping for centuries was waking up. The tunnels erupted into chaos. The city panicked. Buildings collapsed. People fled through the streets. And from deep beneath the chamber, something started climbing upward. Something far too large to see completely. A shape moving through darkness. Ancient. Hungry. Awake. Marcus forced the survivors toward an emergency tunnel leading to the surface. The keepers no longer chased them. They were running too. Everyone was running. From the same thing. Only 3 members of the expedition reached daylight. Marcus, Elena, and Sophia. They never spoke publicly about what happened underground. Officially the expedition ended in a cave collapse. Nothing more. Nothing less. But months later, Sophia received a package with no return address. Inside was Daniel's camera. The camera recovered from the tunnels. The final recording showed only darkness. Heavy breathing. And a single whispered sentence spoken by hundreds of voices at once. A sentence investigators never explained. A sentence Sophia never forgot. The gate is open. The recording ended there. But according to Sophia, something else appeared in the final frame. Something emerging from the darkness behind Daniel. Watching. Waiting. And smiling. Because whatever lived beneath Devil's Passage was no longer underground.